Are you counting down? Okay. Good evening. I'm Corvallis Advocate reporter Kara Nixon, and co-moderating with me tonight is reporter Jada Krenning and publisher Steve Schultz. Welcome to tonight's CitySpeak forum. CitySpeaks are presented by the Corvallis Advocate, which offers daily news online and in non-pandemic times, a twice-monthly deep dive print publication, along with live forums and storytelling nights. CitySpeaks are co-presented by City Club of Corvallis, a volunteer-run non-profit organization that seeks to present a diversity of viewpoints and constructive dialogue. Jada?
Thanks, Kara. Tonight we host 3 debates for local offices, Benton County Commissioner positions 2 and 3, and the candidates for the Ward 7 Corvallis City Council race. The remaining 8 City Council seats are uncontested. Benton County Commissioner position 1 will come up again in 2022. These debates are part of the Advocate's endorsement process. Tonight's questions will include a mix from our editorial board and our viewers. To ask a question while we're live, viewers can comment on the event slide post on our Facebook page, The Corvallis Advocate, or email us at cityspeak@corvallisadvocate.com. Again, that's cityspeak@corvallisadvocate.com. Steve?
Thank you, Jada. Upcoming forums topics include wildfire impacts and prevention, a COVID check-in with local health officials, and our annual progress check concerning local homelessness. Partial funding for these forums comes from Peak Sports and First Alternative Natural Foods Co-op. However, we could not present the CitySpeak series without viewers like you that support us. You can support these forums with a subscription. Visit our page. Levels are $5 or $10 monthly. Donations over and above are, of course, welcomed. Folks, locally run news outlets like the Corvallis Advocate have become increasingly rare nationally and even internationally. Folks that support these sorts of outlets are even rarer. Please join the group that are already helping us, and to the group that does contribute and help with these forums, we thank you. Kara.
Thanks, Steve. The race for Benton County Commission's position 2 includes incumbent Zan Ojero, a Democrat, Pacific Green Progressive candidate Mike Beilstein, and Republican nominee Tom Cordier. We're going to start out with an opening question, and I'll start with Zan. Can you talk about your background and what experiences have prepared you for this position? You have up to a minute.
Thank you. I come to this role with experience primarily working in the conservation sector. I worked professionally for an organization called the Wild Salmon Center in Portland, Oregon, and then here in Corvallis with Marys River Watershed Council. I've also worked at the University of Washington and Oregon State University off and on over my working life as well, primarily in applied science roles with the Sea Grant program at Washington and at Oregon State University. I think that those skills that I gained both in my academic life and in my professional life have been extremely useful in my first term as a county commissioner. One of the things that I learned working in conservation and focusing on salmon in particular is that in order to think about saving salmon as a species or a suite of species, you had to focus on a particular river, but you also had to think about their lifespan out in the ocean and about all of the different aspects that affected that salmon and population of salmon at different scales. And it's very much the same sort of situation when you're focusing on a suite of services at the county. You have to think about the services that are provided to any given individual and doing the best job we can as an organization for all the residents of the county, as well as providing those services 5 years from now, 20 years from now, and providing them for everyone in the community and not just the individual that's standing right in front of you. So it's that skill at thinking about the detail as well as the big picture, being able to dial in, dial out, and think about things in the system's context that has been very, very useful as a commissioner.
Thank you, Zan. Now, same question to you, Mike. What is your background and what experiences have prepared you for this position?
Yeah, thank you. I'm a retired research chemist. I worked at Oregon State University for 30 years in metabolism and nutrition. Aside from that, professional work, I have 2 degrees from Oregon State University in biochemistry, which I got in 1973, and a degree in home economics and human nutrition about 1989. So I got that degree, a master's. And after graduating in 73, I was in the Peace Corps in South Africa in the country of Lesotho, where I was a high school teacher there. Aside from my work, I was for 12 years on the Corvallis City Council. On the City Council, I advocated for good quality services, especially the library, bicycle pedestrian amenities, and transit. And I was also on police advisory boards with the city, so I was very much aware of police, and conscious of and concerned about police accountability. For 15 years, I was secretary of the Corvallis branch of NAACP, and also another 15 years, I was on the board of the Pastoral Counseling Center, Corvallis. I volunteer with the Sustainability Coalition of Corvallis. I'm on the Economic Vitality Action Team and the Housing Action Team and the Community Inclusion Action Team for that. And I've been an activist with the Pacific Green Party for the last 20 years. So that's my background and my qualifications. Thank you.
Thank you. Now finally to you, Tom, same question. What is your background and what experiences have prepared you for this position? You have up to a minute.
Well, I'm an engineer by training and worked at ATI Watchang for 28 years, retired after 10 years of being an executive. I retired as VP of Sales and Marketing, but I also had the environmental responsibilities for a few years. As you know, Watchang is a Superfund site, and so I dealt with those kinds of requirements and those types of issues. One of the things I would say is that during the 1970s, Watchang put up a clay-lined facility to deal with the clarifier underflow solids. We had 100,000 gallons of water going out there every day with 1.7% solids, and we created a huge 23,000 tons of material setting in a clay-lined vessel, and it was leaking into the groundwater. And once I took over the environmental issue and went through all of the issues of what can we do and dealing with the DEQ and EPA, we changed the treatment of that facility, and we treated it in-house without ever going to the farm ponds and adding more liquid to an already leaking facility. And we took we just shut the valve off and started treating it at a hydrofluoric acid precipitation plant that we already had in our facility. And so we saved probably $10 million because we were going to have to haul that stuff out as a liquid material. And it just took a different set of eyes looking at it. And so that's my qualifications. I look at things differently. I don't like just following what my environmental manager thought we ought to do. When they installed that facility back in the 70s, no one within the environmental group even talked to. I was a division director, had about 240 people, and they never even talked to operations on how we might handle that.
I'll give you about 10 more seconds. Sorry about that.
Yeah, so anyway, that's one of my qualifications is I look at things differently, and I don't just follow what the in-house staff recommendations are. I borrow through that, and that's what I do.
Thank you, Tom. Okay, and then I'll start with Mike for this next question. What's motivating you to run, and what are you wanting to get accomplished if elected? You have up to 3 minutes.
Thank you. I'm mostly running because, two things in this race. First, this is a ranked choice election. For the first time, we're using it for county commissioner, and I want voters to have a good experience of that. So I wanted to have a good third candidate, and I was the best I could find. The other thing is I'm very concerned about climate change, and I want, so I'm campaigning on the concept of a Green New Deal. I think for about 10,000 years, humans have found that the more stuff we do, the more we intrude on nature, the more we co-opt into human use, the better life we've had. And that's worked well for 10,000 years, but the thing is we've reached a limit now. And we have the limit of what we're doing to the atmosphere. We're the limit of what we're doing to the oceans. The availability of resources such as fresh water and even fossil fuels is getting limited and more expensive to extract and creating more ecological damage in the process. So I think we've had warnings from climate scientists and ecologists that we have a very short time, a few years, to change the direction that we're going. And that means, we have got to get off of fossil fuels. We have to start living within a solar budget. We have to manage an economy that is going to be quite different from what we have now. So my goal in running is to present that as a program that we can start to change in Benton County as much as we can. Obviously there are global and national and regional issues as well, but I think it's important for every elected official to do what they can to address the problems of climate change. And so that's what I'm running on. I think a vote for me, whether I win or lose, that's a vote saying that, the voters for me who put me first are saying that they think we need to emphasize climate change and our local actions on that. Thank you.
Mike. I'll go to you next, Tom. What's motivating you to run, and what are you wanting to get accomplished if you get elected? You have 3 minutes.
Okay, good evening. In 1960, I married my wife, Patricia Caputo, and we're still married. In 1970, my family of 6 moved to Lynn County and moved to Benton County 26 years ago. With urgency, using masks and distancing, we must reopen live county meetings and live public schools. Why am I running for commissioner? The expanding costs of local governments usually starts with false assumptions in the budgeting process that we cannot reduce employee headcount and must continue to support current spending. For-profit businesses don't think that way. As a retired for-profit business executive, I learned how to do more with less and separate wants from needs. Over the last 3 years, the county hired 100 more employees. So we now have 540 full-time equivalents with an average salary plus benefits of $110,000 a year. That happened under Zan's watch. Commissioners have planned another Justice Center bond measure and for 2021 with estimated cost of a few $100 million. The anchor for that bond measure is Benton County's small 40-bed jail. In former times, the state sized Lynn County Jail for Benton County to use also. Benton County still refuses to use any of the 80 available beds in Albany. New eyes are needed. We have serious county issues with homelessness, illegal drug abuse, and mental illness. There have been many proposed solutions, but none have been as effective as promised. The county suffers from massive influence of Corvallis. May be normal, but it must be reduced. I've spoken with several outlying residents who experience problems with county responses. On social issues, commissioners developed a policy in support of Black Lives Matter For what purpose? BLM is now considered an instrument of violence and death with Marxist goals. I don't see systematic racism here. Oregon forests consume more CO2 than is produced in Oregon, so we are more than carbon neutral now. Oregon's renewable energy, hydropower, already produces 70% of our electricity.
About 15 more seconds.
Pardon me?
15 more seconds, Tom.
Okay, I want to reduce the employee cost by reducing headcount. I want to develop metrics for evaluating effectiveness of mental health and homeless proposals, reduce the scope and cost of the Justice Center bond measure, better represent outside Corvallis residents, and develop contracts with Oregon public safety officials to clearly define the rules of engagement with respect to protests which might damage people or property, immediate detention at the first instance. And I also want to reduce county operating costs using staff suggestions. Thank you.
Thank you. Now moving to Zan. Lastly, what's motivating you to run and what are you wanting to get accomplished if you're elected? You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I first chose to run because I really care about Benton County as a place. I've lived here since 1992. I raised my son here in the community and have great respect for both its natural beauty and for the people that live here in the community. I want to ensure that we have a healthy and safe place for all who live here in Benton County in this special part of Oregon. So in order to do that, we have to balance the best services we can provide within our means and our natural resources, as well as preserving resources for the future. We don't want to, we always need to have a rainy day fund. We always need to have reserves. There are downtimes, and we know from the way the economy here in Oregon works that we tend to fall into recessions deeply, and it's difficult for us to come out of them. We're slower than the rest of the pace of the country. So that said, my chief desires in terms of the next 4 years are to work on the projects that I've begun. First off, we need to, as Tom Cordier mentioned, address COVID and use the best tools that we have available, social distancing, minimizing group sizes, masks, to safely reopen as much of the economy as we can, given virus prevalence in the community. We have to do things safely, based on data, based on science. Second, I want to continue to work on the suite of criminal justice facilities and programs that we have been working on for the last couple of years as a result of our criminal justice systems assessment. We have the smallest jail per capita anywhere in Oregon, and we have probably anywhere in the United States based on the opinions of the experts from CGL, the previous consultants we work with. We have tried various options in terms of jail rental beds to address the short-term needs as we've had various failed bond measures in the past. We do rent beds from Lynn County right now. I believe we have an arrangement for 5 beds. We have problems using those beds because the folks that we tend to send to Lynn County Jail are not the kind of person that the jail in Lynn County wants to have, and they have discretion to say no. So that's a challenge. It's made those beds not very useful. We currently rent beds at Norcor up in the Dalles, and that's been a good arrangement, but it's very far away and it's difficult for the families of folks. So moving on, I very much am involved with the HOPE board addressing homelessness, and we will be coming out with a community-based plan to provide a continuum from emergency shelter to permanent supportive housing and to affordable housing. Greenhouse gas emissions are also a hot topic, and we have very ambitious goals in that arena. And I'm looking forward to additional fleet electrification and doing everything we can in terms of our facilities to minimize those emissions. And lastly, equity is very important to me. I do believe that we need to be providing services that are accessible and culturally responsive to all in the community. And we have a variety of things that we can do to affect that goal. And I'll be working on that over the next 4 years, along with our staff.
Thank you. Thank you all for answering those opening questions. Steve?
Sorry about that. Thank you, Kara. So first, thank you all for answering the opening questions. And actually, we're going to continue on that last one just a little bit. We touched on the jail already. We did get quite a few questions about this. County has approached voters twice about this. Both times, the answer has been no. And it seems to some viewers that the county has sort of doubled down. They've spent more on research. They're going to ask apparently for a larger amount of money for this. And then, Zan, I'm going to give you 2 minutes to elaborate in that you're sitting and have some awareness of the fact that this will probably be hitting ballots either in 21 or 22. And Zan, why don't you go ahead?
Okay. As I mentioned, we have the smallest per capita jail of any county in Oregon. It has significant effect on how our criminal justice system locally works. It means that we arrest far fewer people than they do in other communities, which has its upsides for sure. It means that we rarely arrest someone for anything that's petty or not serious. We usually, so we give a lot of citations. That's resulted in a very high failure to appear rate in court, which really backs up our court system and has a kind of a log jam effect in and of itself. Our law enforcement rearrest the same people again and again on warrants for having failed to appear, but then they fail to appear, and you get the picture. So the philosophy in this business is that you have to have one empty bed. You have to have some place where you can sanction someone if they're on parole or probation and they violate the terms. We don't have that. So our system is a little bit jerry-rigged in order to make it work now. We've had 3 failed attempts, and we believe that we need a new facility that is appropriately sized where we can actually help improve the lives of those that end up incarcerated in our local jail so they could be better neighbors when they come out, because they're all going to be back in our neighborhood. So that we also are looking at it holistically. We know that mental health is a huge issue as well as behavioral health, and we want to also include a crisis resource center within the construct of this criminal justice systems improvement. We're not looking at a jail alone. We're looking at the full system.
Thank you, Zan. And I'll ask a follow-up. Do you know how much the next bond measure will be asking for? Just a number, if you know it.
I cannot answer that question right now.
Okay, great. I'll go ahead and I'll move on to Tom Cordier. 2 minutes concerning the jail proposal. Tom.
Sure. In fact, there are no inmates at the Lynn County Jail as of 2 days ago. Yes, there is a contract, but it has not been honored. It has not been used. Benton County doesn't send. I mean, in the last 3 years, they might have been 3 people that have been put into jail. So the county spends $350,000 a year just in transportation costs going to the Norpac facility in the Dalles. And so I have a year's worth of experience, which doesn't seem like a whole lot, but I befriended a 23-year-old homeless guy here in Albany in the Lynn County system. And all of the aspects of criminal justice, from the court system to mental health, to the jails, to parole and probation, are just a bunch of silos that do their thing, but in a comprehensive way, they don't connect with one another. For example, our mental health people here. This guy that I dealt with was 23 years old. He was found dead in a homeless ditch. After about a year that I dealt with him, I had not his power of attorney, but I had the ability through his signature to be involved in all aspects of his treatment. And it took 4 months before, he had been in jail 10 times, and he had been diagnosed paranoid schizophrenic every single
30 more
time.
seconds.
And yet the parole and probation officer said he's not mentally ill at all. He just needs more discipline. And when they tried to give him medications and treat him as if he was a normal person, they give him a slip of paper. I mean, he's living under a bridge, and he has no ability to remember or even keep a card that gave him an appointment. He can't function like that. And so the complete picture of all these, really trained people that really want
Thank
to
you,
do a good
Tom.
job.
I'm going to move over to Mike Beilstein.
Yeah, thank you.
Mike, 2 minutes on the jail proposal and what you would do in terms of the jail proposal.
Well, I have supported every attempt to, for a local levy for a jail. I'm very concerned about the quality of service we were providing to people who are incarcerated and of course their families and of course the victims of crime. The quality of the facility and its age and its smallness really doesn't allow us to provide good quality service to those people who are in jail. And if they're in jail, they need services. I mean, it's not simply a matter of punishment; it's a matter of getting them to turn their lives around. And I really strongly support the use of NORPAC as a temporary facility. And we had contracts with other counties for the excess jail population, but NORPAC provided much better services. For example, if someone needed mental health counseling or drug counseling, and we put them in jail in Newport, since they weren't Newport prisoners, they weren't eligible to get those services. But at NORPAC, they are getting the services that they would not get if we put them in other places, and they wouldn't get them here either because we don't have the facilities for it. So I certainly would support an attempt for a new criminal justice facility. The size, I think our current jails, our jail census is about 80 inmates, 40 locally and 40 in contracted beds.
30 more seconds.
Okay, but I think it's the quality of services we can provide is more important than the size of the facility. And I think probably a lot of people who are in the jail could be in supervised housing, which with a much lower level of security if they aren't, and I think the facility we would need for that supervised housing would be a lot cheaper than what we need for jail. So I think in developing a new facility, we have to take these opportunities for kind of decarceration into account.
Great, and I want to thank all the panelists. You've been doing really well in terms of just following direction in terms of time. Quite appreciate it. We've also had a number of questions about homelessness, and they kind of come down. I'm going to read this kind of verbatim from one of them. I think typified really what people are thinking. This one is, what policies will you propose to address homelessness in Corvallis, and how will you define and measure the success of those policies if implemented? I'm going to give you about 1.5 minutes each on these. Basically, we're starting to run a little low on time. We do have two-person races, so probably we could extend this one to 7:15 if my fellow moderators agree, which we'll go into in a moment. I'm going to go ahead and start with Tom. 1.5 minutes on homelessness.
My first question would be, what is Corvallis doing about the homeless problem? I don't know what they're doing. They may be doing a lot of work. I don't know, but it automatically does not fall to Benton County to come up with the proposals. The homeless problem exists dominantly in Corvallis. What is Corvallis doing? And I know I'm sympathetic to the homeless problem. But for example, here in Albany, we had a church that was feeding people, and they had a fairly large lot, and they were allowing some tent people to live there. Well, when they asked for a porta potty to be put there for them that they would pay for, the city refused. I mean, there are some decisions made in the trenches that don't make a whole lot of sense. And I don't have a magic wand to solve the homeless problem. What I do know is that when the homeless problems get too big, then the whole society falls, and the public
Another
health
10
falls.
seconds.
And so it is a serious problem, but if you attract, like San Francisco has and Los Angeles has, they provide a lot of stuff out there, and the more you provide, the more you get, the more people come here.
Thank you, Tom. I'm going to go ahead with Mike now.
Thank you. Our homeless problem is kind of the bottom end of a general societal problem. The general societal problem is that rents and house prices have been going up much more rapidly than wages, and so as rents and house prices go up, then people who are barely managing to stay in a home are forced into some form of homelessness. The very visible homelessness we see of the middle-aged or older men who are hairy and smelly and mental health problems and substance abuse problems that we see on the street and camping. That's a special case. They need they need assistance. We need to have shelters available for them so that they aren't camping. But in general, we have to solve this housing issue that more and more people are being forced out of the housing market because of our economy is set up in a way that real estate is becoming more and more valuable while wages to workers isn't keeping up with it. I'm not satisfied with everything that the county and the city are doing together to deal with the homeless problems, and I don't think any official is satisfied. But I think we're working on it.
Great. Thank you, Mike. I'll move to Zan Oshiro.
Thank you, Steve. So the question was about metrics and also about what we can do about.
Yeah, you get a whole minute and a half to solve the homeless problem.
It is a very complex problem, as both Tom and Mike have already mentioned, and there are a lot of causes of homelessness, and the solutions need to be tailored to each one of those individuals and the problems that took them to the streets. The best metric is the number of people we house. I believe that we need to have a continuum of shelter options. We need emergency shelter that will meet the needs of men, women, couples, families. Transitional shelter, permanent supportive housing for those folks that will never be able to earn a living and to make it on their own due to either substance use disorders or to mental health challenges. And then we need subsidized housing, perhaps an increase in the vouchers that are available through HUD, through the federal government. It is a county responsibility because we have the public health department, and housing is a public health issue. It's also a city problem because the majority of unhoused people are here. But we also have unhoused people in Philomath, in LC, in Monroe. It looks different. You can find more people that are in cars or RVs out in the rural part of the county, or people that are doubling up 2 or 3 different families to an apartment or a household. So we know that there's a lot of work to do. what the Hope Board is planning to do is put together some priorities that all of the service agencies can get behind, and the city and the county, so we can leverage additional funds from both state and federal government and private sources to start to build in the infrastructure we need for emergency shelter, transitional shelter, permanent supportive housing, and more affordable housing.
Great,
We also
thank
need
you,
wraparound
Zan.
care.
Okay, great. And then, related to both the jail to some extent and frankly to homelessness, the editorial board at the Advocate did adopt 2-3 years back policy positions stating that we support the idea of two levies in the community, a levy to assist with homeless services, and also a levy to support the recruiting of more mental health professionals in facilities in which to allow them to work. So I'm going to ask this as a question of each of you. Really, you've got around 15 to 30 seconds each. We really are looking for a solid yes or no. Okay, I will start with Mike Beilstein. Would you support a community levy to provide services, enhanced services to the homeless community?
I would support it if it comes up. I prefer a business tax, a business registration fee that would be used to support housing, because I think it's employers who cause the housing shortage, and the university, and so employers, if they are not paying enough wages for people to live here, so obviously they have a responsibility.
Support it, but through a business tax. Okay, and then what about a mental health levy?
I strongly support expanding the services provided by our county health department. And
okay. What about folks that are private insurers and can't find providers?
Well, I think that if they can't find a provider, then I think the county health department should be their provider.
Okay, right. Okay, great. I will go ahead and I will move to Tom Courier. First, levy for enhanced services to the homeless community, yes or no?
My initial reaction is yes, but I want to see the details. I want to see, the assessment report that tends to be the driver for the new jail is heavily based on homeless and drug abuse.
Okay, and then for mental health levy, yes or no?
It depends on what the goals are, and the reason I pointed to that prior assessment report is because that identifies several areas that could be being assessed properly, but are not being assessed properly. And so that's why I can't.
Can you give me a specific?
I can.
Real briefly.
Yeah, let me look. The criminal justice system requires improved data collection and outcome evaluation to support policymaking. And so that's one of them. And in the mental health facility or arena, we have the same kind of stuff.
Okay, got it. Zan, would you support levy to provide enhanced services for the homeless community?
Somehow we have to fund that.
Thank you, Tom. Zan, would you?
A levy.
Yes.
Yes, possibly. It depends on what we come up with as the Hope Board in terms of the solutions. But I do believe that there's a lot of other money on the table that we're not taking advantage of from the state and the federal government and from the private.
But if ultimately it required a levy, you'd support it?
I would have to think hard about what our community could bear in terms of taxes.
Okay.
But
and what about mental health?
Yes. Mental health specialists at this point, no. And the reason for my answer is that we have several vacancies. We have a very, very hard time filling any vacancies for qualified mental health professionals.
Right now, if we were to increase their pay through funded through a levy funds, would that help?
It might, but this is a challenge not just here. It's a challenge statewide and indeed nationally. It's a pipeline issue in terms of the number of people that are trained in this arena, and it's also a quality of work issue in terms of burnout. I think that we overall have a lot of issues to address in the whole mental health profession in order to make it a profession that people can thrive in and not just survive in.
Great, thank you, Zan. I think we have it. I want about a minute from each of you. What is the most important thing that you can think of that the county would be able to undertake to boost locally owned businesses and employment? And I will start with Mike Beilstein.
Well, that's a tough question to ask me because, you know, in general, I'm opposed to economic development. I don't think we need more work. I don't think we need greater income in this county. I think the fact that we are attracting people, that 70% of the people who work in Corvallis are coming from outside the community, means we don't need to add jobs. We don't, you know, so I've always, you know, all the time I was on the city council, I've always encouraged the idea of, rather than encouraging new employment or more jobs in Corvallis, we should be encouraging people to move their businesses to Lebanon or Monroe or Philomath so that we don't have these people commuting into the town here. I'm basically anti-economic development.
Thank you, Mike. I will move next to Zan Ojero. What is the most important thing or two that the county can be doing to support or boost rather locally owned businesses and employment? Zan, about a minute and a half.
I understand what Mike is saying about economic development. I do believe that we need to support our local businesses to the best of our ability, that I value local production and local creativity and innovation. We need to think about the resilience of our economy here, about how we can sustain people's livelihoods. I think the most important thing to do in order to attract people, if we want to attract more, is to have affordable housing. The reason that people are commuting into Corvallis is because we don't have a sufficient supply of affordable housing here. We've priced people out of the community.
Any other points?
I add that and supporting education are the two most important things we can do.
Housing, education. Tom.
Well, I know that Lynn County has attracted many businesses that the Veterans Home and the medical college there. And so the question I would have is, what kind of restrictions has the county or the cities put on new businesses? I ran into a guy in Alsea that runs a bed and breakfast, and he is a property owner in what's called downtown Alsea. But he tore down with a permit, he tore down a business building and wants to get it and wants to rebuild a store downtown. And he's been waiting 6 months for the county to finally to give him permission to do that. And he told me it was all held up because of the requirements to have downtown parking, and that it stops him dead, and he's about ready to tear up his permit to rebuild.
You would help streamline processes with the county.
Yeah,
yes?
find out what the bottlenecks are.
Okay, now what I'd like to do next is closing statements for each of the candidates. You will have 45 seconds. I will start with Mr. Beilstein.
Thank you. My closing statement is that I think we need a Green New Deal for Benton County. We need to be cooperating statewide and nationally, regionally, addressing the issues of climate change. We need to take whatever climate action we can locally. We need to start moving people off of our dependence on fossil fuels. So that's my closing statement. Thank you.
Great, and then we'll go ahead to Mr. Cordier.
Well, I would just say that this bond measure, the proposed bond measure, and by the way, the city has put out a statement of their goal is to get this in front of the voters next year. And so my closing statement is I want to do a better job with money management. Local governments have a tremendous way of getting income, but in terms of managing it properly and actually evaluating what they're doing, they do a lousy job. And I don't single out Benton County for that. They focus on getting grants. We pay people wages to get grants, which takes it out of our other pocket. And so the money management side, to me, drives everything. If you
Thank you,
want
Mr.
money
Courtier.
yeah, thank you.
Ms. Ojero.
Thank you. I would like to have all of your viewers rank me as their first choice for Benton County position number 2. I have 4 years of experience in this role. I, at this point, have a great sense for the complexity of the issues. I understand the challenges that we face and the opportunities that we face. We have a fantastic staff, and we have the ability to address both the criminal justice systems issues, to break down those silos, to improve our mental health law enforcement interactions, and to address many of the issues facing the unhoused in our community, both in Corvallis and beyond. I look forward to the opportunity to continue to work on those issues along with our partners in the cities, Lynn County and Lincoln County.
Thank you, Ms. Ojero. We will now move over. I want to thank all of the position 2 candidates. I want to thank you all for respecting the time limits and moderation for the conversation this evening. Thank you, Kara, for your moderation as well. We move to Jada Krenning, who will moderate for position 3. Jada.
Thanks, Steve. The race for Benton County Commission's position 3 includes Democrat Nancy Wise, Republican John Sarna, and Libertarian Cody Sidar, who declined to appear this evening. So first, we'll start with just an opening about your background and your experiences. We'll start with Nancy. 1 minute to answer. What is your background and what experiences have prepared you for this position?
Hi, thank you. I am Nancy Wise. I am running for Benton County Commissioner because I love this community and I want to see the best version of Benton County possible. I will bring a new energy and a fresh perspective to the Board of Commissioners. I am unique in this position as I have years of experience in local government and within Benton County government. I'm in my 2nd term as a Corvallis City Councilor, and I'm currently the Vice President of the City Council. I have also been serving on the county's Planning Commission and Budget Committee. I have several other roles and liaison positions, including the Corvallis Benton County Economic Development Advisory Board. And with this experience, I know that I will be ready to step in on day 1 as commissioner and get right to work. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. We'll now move to John. 1 minute to answer. What is your background and what experiences have prepared you for this position?
Okay. Sorry. Yeah, I'm John Sarna, Republican candidate for this position. Now, I have the same objectives as Nancy, making this place a great place to live. However, I've had a variety of life experiences that allow me to relate to the many problems people here may face. My background, I grew up on the south side of Chicago, where high school thugs actually shook down the rest of us for spare change. I worked at many jobs throughout this great country, including at minimum wage. I've done trash pickup, combat infantryman in Vietnam, computer programmer, civil engineer. Along the way, I picked up a doctorate in environmental science engineering, where I learned to use experts to solve environmental problems. My last job was supervising a diverse professional workforce while representing California in negotiations over the Truckee River and Lake Tahoe, involving then Senator Harry Reid. I've done things like I've gone through a divorce. I have worked while my wife has managed our 4 kids. I've also managed our 4 kids while my wife worked. And most difficult, I've actually had to raise 2 small kids myself while watching my then wife slowly succumb to cancer. However, I'm now happily married. And as the saying goes, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Thank you, John. We'll move to Nancy again. Nancy, what's motivating you to run for this position, and what are you hoping to accomplish if you're elected? You have about 3 minutes to answer.
My top priorities for Commissioner include addressing the economic impacts due to COVID, prudent steps forward on the criminal justice implementation plan, protecting county resource zones such as multi-purpose agriculture, exclusive farm use, forest conservation, and open space, and also improving public records access and transparency. I have focused on these goals because they are all inextricably linked. The local economy, crime, mental health, wraparound services, land use, all these are tied together and make up the fabric of livability for Benton County. To address economic impacts due to COVID, I do acknowledge we are still in the middle of COVID. It will not be over by January. So mitigating the impacts as we go is going to be just as important as the work we do after. We can accomplish this by prioritizing the work of the Economic Development Department. Prudent steps forward on the criminal justice implementation plan. Benton County needs a new jail, but not only do we need a new jail, we need prevention and wraparound services as well. We need to invest in accountability and prevention and treatment. We need the carrot and the stick, so to speak. Mental health services, substance abuse treatments, crisis respite, a sobering center, all of these things are included in that because Benton County ranks 6th per capita in highest crime among Oregon counties. I do not want my county to be ranked 6th. I would like our county to be ranked 36th. And as far as protecting county resource zones, these are all very important aspects of our county, not just for environmental conservation, but also for preserving our farm and agricultural land. That's also very important. We need to uphold the intent of the development code, and we need to preserve the qualities that give Benton County its identity. By the way, this is not a cost. This is a lens to look through as we make future decisions. And lastly, improving public records access. People should know what their government is up to. You should and find advisory board and committee meetings, audio recordings. You should be able to find up-to-date plans. Things like the budget committee, they should be recorded. They currently are not. Minutes should reflect in-depth conversations, not just be regurgitated agendas with then added in who made the motion. Currently, when the commissioners are on video, you don't always have access to the documents that they are looking at. All those things, it's not a huge cost associated with that. It'd be primarily looking at revamping the website and then changing some of the status quo operations, such as how minutes are written and how document sharing during meetings works.
Great, thank you, Nancy. Same question to John. What's motivating you to run, and what are you hoping to accomplish? You have about 3 minutes to answer.
Okay, thanks. Well, 15 years ago, my late wife and I decided this was the best place to live and raise kids. So we bought a house here. And it took a while to get here, and I really did enjoy it once I was here. But now I see many of the problems that face our community. To address these, I've been active in volunteer work. But given my education and experience, I believe I could be much more effective joining the other 2 commissioners and serving our community. I believe 4 things are needed to keep our community the great place it is today. Improving disaster preparedness, for one, supporting and fully funding law enforcement, making, like Nancy, making government more accountable and fiscally responsible. And lastly, ending divisiveness in politics, which is kind of tearing our country apart right now, not only here. As for disaster preparedness, I began my campaign 6 months ago focusing on this issue. Since then, Oregon has seen 3 major disasters. Surprise, a pandemic, riots, and wildfire. and we were not at all prepared for any of them. My first priority would be to ensure our community is well prepared with good access to shelter, supplies, and communications. For example, I propose implementing Shake Alert in this county so staff could get some early warning before a major earthquake hits. And now, even though it's not fully functional in Oregon, Shake Alert can still detect an earthquake starting elsewhere along the Cascadia Fault, and that can be transmitted to local county staff if the computers would be set up right. I'd interconnect water distribution systems, so if one community loses its water supply, others can help out in an emergency. I'd implement what I call 1,000 points of light with solar power systems. So these systems are capable of remaining on after the grid goes down, which most of them are not now, and that be able to provide emergency power for radios and cell phones, refrigeration, for food and medicine, etc. Now, as for law enforcement, my position is pretty strong. Do not defund the police, nor replace them with popular social programs. Do not allow minor crimes to go unrestricted. I do not want this community to become like Seattle or San Francisco, where police are told to look the other way while vagrants are shoplifting, trespassing, interfering with businesses, etc. That doesn't mean enforcement can't be done without compassion for the mentally ill, the homeless, and the addicted. They, as well as the rest of us, benefit from strong law enforcement. As for making government accountable and fiscally responsible, we should have full disclosure and open doors to all public sector decisions, especially those involving expenditures. Let's not stack committees and advisory boards with people who agree with those who appoint them. Elected officials and their staff should reply to all requests for information and comments on policies. That was my position as chief of the Cal Nevada section. And I found out that I've made several requests here, and I have not received any response at all to a phone call or even emails and other things. Anyway, and to finish up, as for ending divisive politics, I believe elected officials should set an example for others to follow. They should condemn other people for doing things like stealing campaign signs or bashing the opinions of others. On divisive issues, what I would do is I would try to find win-win solutions that appeal to both sides. And I've done this during negotiations working for representing the state of California. And I brought together a large number of different communities with diverse interests so that they could agree on a position that California would have and take that, and we would be able to negotiate that with Nevada. And we actually completed a Truckee River operating agreement, which, the end of the 50-year arguments in court and otherwise, elsewhere about, how to allocate the waters of Lake Tahoe and the Truckee River. Anyway, these are my positions, and I hope they resonate with you. If not, I am open to hearing why. Thanks.
Thank you, John. We'll move on to Kara.
Thank you, Jada. So again, these are questions from our audience and our editorial board at The Advocate. So the first question, back to the jail. Voters have turned down measures for a new jail in the past, and it is widely expected that the county will now approach the voters with a broader measure. What's your view of the county's needs, and what do you believe the county should ask the voters to approve in terms of the jail? You have 2 minutes. We'll start with Nancy.
Thank you for the question. We are in the situation in Benton County where offenders know that there isn't real enforcement. So in many cases, there is not motivation. There's not motivation to not offend, which directly impacts our livability, our safety, trickles down into our businesses and economy. We need to not only prioritize a larger jail, but we need to also prioritize services, prevention, wraparound services, mental health. We need the whole meal deal. We need the best case scenario. And that is how we can be most effective.
Thank you. On to John. What are your thoughts on having a new jail?
Okay, well, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, yeah, I certainly agree with the need for a new jail. I think Nancy put it well. I put it as catch and release. Basically, we catch people and we have to release them because there's not enough jail space. I would go for scenario 3 in what was it? I don't know, one of the plans that came through, and that puts the focus on accountability and custody treatment. And it will pay for pretrial services, an updated classification system, electronic monitoring, in-custody treatment, and education programs. So what's left out are the respite care, sobering centers, restorative justice, transitional housing, and enhanced community services. So I'll differ from Nancy on that because that's an extra. So as of now, what's happening is the jail, this particular scenario will cost about 160 million. That's in addition to what we and we have to pay that off eventually. The county will be. An additional 60 million is needed to go through and get to this best practices model. And I would support I would look at that, and I would only support whatever is needed to prevent criminal behavior. So if there's a direct nexus between criminal behavior and all these other services, I would support that. But otherwise, I would not support those things. And I believe the CARE committee right now is looking at housing, and they are looking at ways they can actually utilize that. Maybe the best thing they actually discuss this is you could take what's happening on the East Coast is they're looking at taking services from the county or other places in the county and bring those to the jail as needed. If you have immediate or very quick responses, you can actually reduce the problems that people with mental health issues and addiction issues are having. So that's my perspective.
Thank you. On to our next question. I'll start with you, John. So what policies will you propose to address homelessness in Corvallis, and how will you define and measure the success of those policies if implemented? You have 2 minutes.
Define the success. I don't know how to define the success. That's something else. But as far as looking at homelessness, as I said, I've been attending these CARE meetings on homelessness, and I know Zan has been, she's been the lead as a commissioner in doing this. And so, I would to some extent follow her lead, except, of course, I would voice my own opinion as necessary. But as I said, there are ways that have been come up in the CARE committee that would address homelessness. I consider homeless to be what's called a wicked issue, a wicked problem is what OSU calls it. And it's tied to so many other problems and also a divisive issue within the community. So it's a very difficult one to solve. You have to solve a lot of different things. But I think that I would look at what the Hope Committee is doing, try to react to that, and see what works and what doesn't work, and basically, get the information, look at the issue, consider options, and then try to figure out an option that would help benefit the homeless the most. Because certainly, there is a homeless problem here that we really need to address. And if I can have time, I'll add that I actually liked Rich Caroni's proposal a couple of years ago. He had this place, and it could happen elsewhere, but it had a place north of Corvallis where he actually he had a big area where the homeless could go in. He was going to give them different building materials so they could help build their own small shelters. And I think, to get them invested in improving themselves, that is one of the most important things I believe you can do for the homeless.
Thank you, John. Same question to you, Nancy. What policies will you propose to address homelessness in Corvallis?
Thank you. That's a great question, and one that I felt strongly about for a very long time. Homelessness was one of the issues that first got me to run for city council. We spend thousands and thousands of dollars on the impacts of homelessness between camp cleanups and many other issues. Study after study shows that it is actually less expensive, more humane, and more effective to house and provide support. I definitely support permanent housing as the ultimate goal for individuals experiencing houselessness. We have a shortage of that right now. So in the meantime, there has to be a continuum of temporary options. Things like, so managed is very important, I believe. Managed coordination, monitoring, behavior compliance, fire inspections, all that good stuff. But legal car and tent camping can be an option, tiny house, micro shelters. And I'll just note that I believe that should be on private property run by social services, not in city or county parks. Now, having said all of that, the HOPE Committee, the Home Opportunity Planning and Equity Advisory Board, is in the process right now of solidifying their top 4 priorities. And so I really think we need to wait and see what they come out with and then move forward with their with what they recommend.
Thank you. Okay, next question is, would you support a local levy to enhance the county's approach to homelessness? We're looking for just a solid yes or no answer here. You have about 15 to 30 seconds to answer. I'll start with you, Nancy.
Can you repeat the question?
Would you support a local levy to enhance the county's approach to homelessness?
A yes or no is very difficult here. I could see a situation where I could, but without having any of the facts, there are just too many moving pieces there to say yes.
Thank you. John?
I'm going to say exactly the same thing as Nancy. It's premature to determine this, given what, that we currently have the Hope Board looking at these options. And in any case, I wouldn't support a levy unless I know a lot of the details. I'm a details person. I want to see what the details are in the issue. I want to look at what the pros and cons are, and I want to look at the different options that are available and then go from there.
Okay, thank you. And then along the same lines, waiting lists for mental health providers is an issue. Would you support a levy to help recruit more providers and offer more facilities that help? John?
I'm going to say that mental health providers, again, I think what the Care Board said is that, now Zan had a good answer about this before, is that, we're having a hard time recruiting mental health. I wasn't aware of that, but we're having a hard time recruiting mental health people. And I'd like to hear again, what the options are. Before I support a levy, I want to know the pros and cons. I know how much it's going to cost. The Hope Board did say that, we do have, if you bring in people, we have a lot of existing positions for mental health. Let's bring them in. Let's look at the option of bringing them in and helping out first. And then if that's not sufficient, then consider a levy.
Okay, thank you, John. Nancy, same question. Would you support a levy to help recruit more providers and offer more facilities that help?
So my answer is going to be very similar to the last answer. Without knowing enough of the details, there's no way to say. The idea does have potential, but I'm weary of piecemeal solutions, and I definitely am more in favor of comprehensive approaches.
Okay, thank you. Okay, now moving on a little bit about economics. What do you think the county can do to boost locally owned businesses and employment? Nancy, I'll start with you. You have about 30 seconds.
Thank you. There are several things, things in general, like supporting family wage jobs, nurturing small to medium-sized businesses, recruitment of new companies and job creation, innovative tech businesses and startup support. Those are all kind of abstract. So if you're looking for something more tangible, I would say we could start with having the city of Corvallis annex the airport into city limits, and that would take away some of the layers of bureaucracy for new businesses trying to open up there. Long term, we are really lacking industrial and manufacturing land. Benton County used to have a significant number of high wage jobs in the manufacturing sector, and that really pulled our average wage higher. That's something that we are lacking in now. We need space for that. We need space for example, OSU graduates and OSU projects. We need a place for them to plant their roots and thrive rather than going to other counties or other states.
Thank you. John, same question. What can the county do to boost locally owned businesses and employment?
Okay, well, the first problem is, COVID's come around and we're actually losing businesses, which is a real problem. The first thing I would do is, actually, I like Nancy's answers. I probably want to consult with her, but I also want to consult with Kate Porsche, who's, working for the county, and she's looking at ways to give grants to different businesses and finding out how to help them out. And that actually might be an option, is to give grants to counties to businesses, or make grants or something that would make this county more attractive to people. And one thing that's on my short list is law enforcement. People don't want to come here if there's a lot of homeless hanging around, if there's crime in the neighborhood. So we need to reduce all crime. We don't want people sleeping in doorways. That's if does a person want to come and build a business in this community? if they have the homeless coming to different places to their business and sleeping in their garage. I know people where people have gone into their garage and the police can't do anything about them. They kick them out. They come back the next day. And so something needs to be done to address that particular situation. Affordable housing, that's a good point. Being proactive about creating. I can't think of anything else right now. Sorry.
Okay, and since we have a little bit more time, here's a different question. What actions do you believe the county needs to undertake to assure its cybersecurity? 30 seconds, Nancy.
Well, that is a pertinent question with the elections coming up. I know that one of the county policies is to lock down their website or not overuse their website, or forgetting what the actual words are, but they have measures for security within the first 30 days before an election. Other than that, I have to admit, I am not an IT professional. So in this circumstance, I would really look to the professional staff to make some recommendations.
Thank you. John, same question.
Yeah, I heard Nancy's answer, and I'd do the same thing as I would do with any complex issue. You break the issue into parts, see where the problems are. You got to go see where the problems are. You consult with IT people in the county, find out what are they doing, what issues that they have with it. Then if there's a significant problem, you can bring in experts from other areas to help with the issue. Then if you know what the problem is, once you know what the problem is, you create options for different approaches for solving it. And then you go from there and decide, what is the most cost-effective approach.
Okay, thank you. And then now for our final question and closing statement. What do you think is the biggest issue facing Corvallis and Benton County? How would you address it? And why do you think people should vote for you? John, I'll start with you.
Okay. I guess, should I answer this one, or is this the last question too?
This is the last question, so go ahead and answer all of them.
Okay. So the most important thing facing Benton County is disaster preparedness. And I really think we need to be better prepared for disasters. I like this community the way it is. I would hate for something to happen like the Cascadia earthquake goes, and suddenly we're without power for a month or even more, because the transformers all get blown away, and therefore we can't have the lights on to recover from. So I think I've made some suggestions before as to how to address that. And now, in summary, then I'm going to wrap up at this point after that. But anyway, while we can argue over how to get there, I believe we all want the same thing in our community, which is it to be a great place to live in. My pledge to you is, as a commissioner, I will make decisions based on what is best for Benton County and all its residents. If a majority of the residents feel strongly about some issue that I do not believe is in our best interest, I would want to have an open discussion on its merits before taking any action to the contrary. My vote as commissioner would then respect the will of the people, the majority, unless there are consequences like the start of the COVID pandemic. Finally, I do listen to experts, and I'm always willing to change my position based on newer, better information. So my policy is to have an open door and hear what everybody has to say. And if you know me personally, you know that I love to listen and hear what others' opinions are, and what they think about having to solve the different problems that we face, which are challenging. So
thank you, John.
Okay.
Nancy, same question to you. What do you think the biggest issue is facing Corvallis and Benton County, and how would you address it? And then close with why people should vote for you.
Thank you. Well, I think the most acute issue in Benton County is going to be addressing the economic impacts due to COVID. As I touched on earlier, we can address that by prioritizing the work of the Economic Development Department. I would say there's another chronic issue, which is the criminal justice implementation plan. And again, we need to invest in accountability and prevention in that plan. And just to wrap up, I will say I have the experience. I've served on Benton County boards and commissions. As a city councilor, I have worked on several joint city-county initiatives. like the formation of the Hope Advisory Board and the 911 Service District. I love Benton County. I want our county to be inclusive, vibrant, and healthy. Tonight, I am asking for your vote. Please vote for me first. If your heart tells you to vote for someone else first, please vote for me second. Thank you to CitySpeak and Advocate and all the sponsors for hosting this event.
Thank you. Thanks to both of you for participating in this evening's CitySpeak debate. Steve?
Thank you for participating, and we will be moving over to City Council Ward 7 race now. Thank you, Kara. So we have two folks running, incumbent Paul Schaffer and challenger Nic Bowman. I'm going to start with Nic. What's your background? What experiences have prepared you for this position? You got around 30 to 60 seconds.
Thank you very much. My experiences with direct government are minimal. What I do bring to the table is over 15 years of managerial experience in customer service and 7 years as a professional educator at the elementary level. I think that I have many skills that deal interpersonally, but most of my experience has been with managing of people and processes. I think that both of those are very valuable for this position.
Thank you. We'll move over to Paul.
Okay, first, thanks, Steve. Thank you, Steve, and the City Club and Advocate for organizing this. I think it's important that this is done, and I appreciate whoever's attending for their interest in local government. My background coming into this, I'm a longtime resident of Corvallis. I grew up on the East Coast. I went to college at Michigan State and University of Virginia. I've been here 36 years, and I'm not going anywhere. My kids grew up here, went to Oregon State. My wife worked for Corvallis High School for quite a few years, retired from there 4 years ago. I'm a scientist by training. I have degrees in biological sciences, fisheries, and PhD work in an integrated environmental sciences program. But more importantly, my education has taught me to think critically, be analytical, and to rely on facts and data. I came here to Corvallis in 1984 to work as a contractor at the US EPA. I spent the last 12 years of my working career with the state of Oregon, Department of Energy, working as a technical and policy analyst or Hanford cleanup. I have a skill set that I think qualifies me well for city council. I've done challenging technical and policy work. I've worked successfully on contentious issues and with diverse stakeholders. I try to work in a collaborative manner and to build consensus, and I've worked with budgets. Finally, I'm running because I want to continue to build on the work I've done the last year as a city councilor in Corvallis, and to use that experience to better represent the residents of Ward 7.
Thank you, Mr. Schaffer. I'm going to now ask really a pretty central question. What's motivating you to run in Mr. Schaffer's instance, to seek another 2 years in Mr. Bowman's instance to also be running for that period of time as a challenger? I'll go ahead and I'll start with you, Nic. What's motivating you to run? What are you hoping to accomplish in that 2-year period of time?
Two separate questions here. And the first, my motivation to run is simple. I read an article in the newspaper that said that we didn't have any options or any choices for candidates. So I responded to that call to action. I have no particular interest in replacing Mr. Schaffer as a person, as a council member. I think that he has done a fantastic job learning the ropes and putting his voice into council as it has been for the last year. I hope to accomplish, if elected and given the chance, what has been already expressed by several of the other individuals this evening. I want to live in a Corvallis that is the best version of itself. I think that there are some incremental steps that can be sought after to improve certain areas, such as has been discussed, problems surrounding the unhoused in our community, our law enforcement and its interaction with the community, as well as our recovery from the impacts of COVID. I think that I am not an expert in many fields, but I perceive myself to be a very good filter of information and critical thinking as well. I bring to this job nothing more than a desire to serve the city. I have not always been the best servant of the city. In fact, I have done very little to put myself out there and be an advocate for those that I have already spoken who I wish to now serve. But I hope to change all that. I spent a lot of months in quarantine, as many did, looking for a new purpose and things to do. I think that this is the opportunity that could be the start of a very long future serving Corvallis.
Thank you, Mr. Bowman and Mr. Schaffer.
Okay, I several thoughts on this. First of all, I care deeply about Corvallis. It's been my home for, as I said, more than 30 years. It's been a great place to work, raise family, and live, and I want to keep it that way. Similar to what Mr. Bowman said a moment ago, during my working career, I left all the heavy lifting for local government, school boards, and so on to other people. I was busy with a family and a career. Now I have time, and I feel that I have a responsibility to give back to the community, and I think this is the best way to do it. I want to continue to represent the varied opinions, concerns of the people who live in Ward 7. I have no axe to grind. I don't have any hidden agendas. I don't seek any higher office. What I want to do is be the best representative of the people in this ward that I can. Be a bit more specific about some of my concerns and what I'm running for. I think, first of all, as other people have noted in the county commissioner discussions and Mr. Bowman mentioned, COVID is going to have some serious effects on city budgets and thus on city programs and services over the next several years. I think the experience that I have as a counselor in relatively good times positions me to have a good appreciation of what the issues are, what the trade-offs are. And then the other thing, no, that's not something I wanted to say. The two big issues that I see that we're going to have to work with, housing, as other people have mentioned. We've got 20,000 commuters coming to Corvallis every day. We simply need to do a better job of finding places for people to live, both for their sanity and as a way of managing carbon emissions. We've added several thousand new student type apartments, but our vacancy rate in rental is still exceedingly low. The other big issue is homelessness. And as has been said by others, it's a much bigger issue than Corvallis. It's partly a housing crisis. It's short-term emergency people who've lost their homes, and it's chronic homelessness. And we need to have a variety of programs to address both those short and long-term issues. And the Hope Advisory Board I'm looking to them to help define some directions and priorities. That's why they exist. And I'll stop there.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you, Nick. I'm going to be moving over to Jada, who will moderate the rest of the evening.
Thanks, Steve. To start, we'll stay on the topic of homelessness. We'll start with Paul. 2 minutes to answer this question. What policies will you propose to address homelessness in Corvallis, and how will you define and measure the success of those policies if implemented?
I think measuring success, I'll start with that. I think the obvious metrics are we see a reduction in the number and condition of the homeless in Corvallis and surrounding communities. And I think also a second metric is going to be that there is less public angst about where people are living, how they're behaving, living in doorways downtown, leaving trash and garbage and human waste and so on. I think, as I just mentioned, I'm looking to the Hope Board to be a major leader on helping set priorities for short and long-term management of the homeless crisis. The city is doing a lot. I think it often kind of flies under the radar. We work with churches, we work with nonprofits, we work with social service agencies, and we fund all of those things. So we're funding the men's shelter, the Rain Women's Shelter. We're funding, I lost it here, micro shelters. We're working, community development's working with churches primarily to make it easier to put up micro shelters. Those are all little incremental things. We need to create more shelter, more homeless, or more places for the homeless. I think the whack-a-mole approach, where you go out and post a homeless camp, move them someplace else, and they have nowhere to go. I think that's a completely useless activity. It wastes resources, and it does nothing for those people who are already living in a horrible situation. So again, just to wrap up, I think we're looking to hope to be a group that's helping us point the way into the future on homelessness.
Great, thank you, Paul. Nic, same question to you, about 2 minutes to answer. What policies will you propose to address homelessness in Corvallis, and how will you define and measure the success of those policies if implemented?
Specific policies that support additional funding are one approach. You can't just throw money at every single problem and hope that that is the solution. Homelessness and unhoused is a pervasive issue that has not recently come up. It has been an issue in Corvallis for much of its couple decades recent history. To address this issue, we need to get into a situation of looking at more upstream interventions. If you continue to have a homelessness issue, and to use Paul's Mr. Schaffer's words, this whack-a-mole approach of trying to intervene on specific instances, you can help those individuals, but you're still dealing with a constant influx of this population. So looking further upstream for a solution, addressing issues around a livable minimum wage, addressing issues of our housing costs that we have talked about, healthcare costs and veterans benefits. Mental health is also an issue that is something that is driving not all, but many in this situation to live in this constant cyclical state of houselessness and homelessness. So addressing the need of filling those roles for those mental health community liaisons that we apparently are a shortage of. And we have many partnerships to continue to explore. And I believe mental health services and the programs surrounding the education at OSU around mental health services is actually pretty good. So I think that there's a partnership to be explored there as well.
Jada, could I just interrupt 1 second?
Yeah.
I used the phrase, and Nic also did, of whack-a-mole, and that's a totally inelegant and probably inappropriate way to describe the situation. It's been used by other people, and unfortunately you fall into these phraseologies that get used a lot, but it's frankly pretty disrespectful of the people who are living that experience, and I apologize for that.
Thanks. Thank you, Paul. This next question also relates to homelessness. It's been asked of the other panelists as well. So maybe more of a yes or no answer to this one, about 30 seconds to respond. But would you support a local levy to enhance the county's approach to homelessness? We'll start with Paul.
I think you're going to get the same answer you've heard from a lot of other people. Without knowing what that money is going to be used for, I would neither support nor not support an issue. I think clearly funding is needed to address issues, but wouldn't support anything until I know what it's going for, and I am convinced that it's going to meaningfully help the situation.
Thank you, Paul. Nic, same question to you. Would you support a local levy to enhance the county's approach to homelessness?
Well, I could give the same answer that we've heard 6 or 7 times this evening, but I'll just say yes. I would assume that the details would be there in the good faith efforts. I don't just believe that, as I said earlier, throwing money at a problem is the best and only solution, but funding does help.
Thank you, Nic. This next question is a bit lengthy. So earlier this year, the city offered programs helping COVID-strained local businesses, but both North Corvallis businesses and minority-owned businesses reported either not being informed or not being able to benefit. In our reporting, Corvallis Chamber of Commerce President Simon Date advocated for a city-run business registry, the goal being better communications with businesses. So ultimately, the question is, would you support the city developing this registry over your next term? You have about 30 seconds to answer. We'll start with Paul.
Okay. 30 seconds probably isn't enough to more than touch that. First of all, let me say that economic development, which is a city program that's also works very closely with the county, has made tremendous efforts during COVID. Reach out. They've had contacts with several hundred businesses in the city and county, and I think they've tried to reach to everybody. Yes, there were some programs that focused downtown, which is unfortunate, but I think more recently programs and efforts have gone way beyond that. The biggest challenge now is limitations on who you can support with money from the state level. The county's having a hard time finding particularly minority and rural businesses who can accept money into the programs.
Thank you, Paul. Nic, same question to you. Would you support the city developing a registry over your term?
I would support it if the idea of the registry is simply to increase communication. I don't think that there is any single topic that can be over communicated in that sort of situation. I work with families who I've sent numerous emails to about their students, to the students themselves, and sometimes the lines of communication just get crossed. So if the point of the registry is to simply increase communication so that businesses can access these services that are out there, then I'm 100% for it. I would ask though, at what cost? Because with every new system comes a new cost, and that is something to be weighed in its analysis.
Great, thank you, Nic. This question is about elementary school, actually. Though outside your scope, this is a viewer question. Though outside your scope, the viewer asked what you think of Jefferson Elementary School being renamed Jaguar Elementary. You have 30 seconds to answer this one. We'll start with Nic.
I've actually talked to several people in my rounds who are very concerned about this, and to each of them I've said sometimes change is hard to take because we are a culture steeped in tradition. I mean, it's hard to step away from what is familiar when what is familiar has been so good to you. But we're looking at a situation of addressing underlying issues of racism in addressing the name of that school. And while some people hold very in high esteem all of our founding fathers, there is a point in our history where we have to be a little bit reflective, and the name is not meant to be a disrespect to other great deeds that have been done, but as a way to move forward as a culture.
Great, thank you, Nic. Paul, same question. What do you think of Jefferson Elementary being renamed Jaguar Elementary?
I have three thoughts. Let me start with the simple one. Jaguars are not something that you find in the Pacific Northwest. It's a kind of a awkward outlier of a name. And frankly, it's there only because Jaguar and Jefferson both started with a J. Second, I think the process by which these decisions were made for all 3 elementary schools were dreadful. There was a rushed judgment. There was not a clear process. There was not adequate opportunity for public input to it. Third, as somebody who attended Mr. Jefferson's University, I totally disappointed with the decision. I think it took a very complex man who did tremendous things before and after the foundation of the United States, and who, frankly, if you think about it, if it weren't for him, we would not have Lewis and Clark expedition, we would not have the Pacific Northwest, we would not have Corvallis or a school name to argue. But I think the decision was made based on a single criteria. It did not consider the circumstances in which that person lived. And I do not support that decision, at least in the case of Thomas Jefferson. I'm disappointed in the school board.
Thank you, Paul. Next question. We'll start with Paul for this one too. What would you do to help the city boost area locally owned businesses and employment?
I think, let me answer a somewhat different question. I think for the next few years, the focus of Corvallis and the Mid-Willamette Valley has got to be on keeping the businesses we already have. Some have closed, many are in dire straits. The city has done some things to support businesses, and the Economic Development Group has worked very hard to try to preserve. They've worked very hard to identify themes for new businesses, particularly small businesses, obviously in several areas, all the way from agritourism to tech work. And are they doing enough? You can always argue that they should be doing something different or doing something more, but frankly, with the resources they have, I think they're doing an awful lot. And I think Corvallis businesses and Benton County businesses, because the two work hand in hand, have been reasonably successful over the past several years. We also need, before we move businesses into town, I think we need to recognize the desperate need for housing.
Great, thank you, Paul. Nic, same question to you. What would you do to help the city boost area locally owned businesses and employment?
Taking from some of what I've heard earlier, there is a great need to retain our natural talents that are already produced and sort of cultivated here at OSU. It is possible that to incentivize them to stay, we offer them some sort of initial business startup program, something that incentivizes them to put their talents and entrepreneurial spirit into the community that sort of cultivated their education and expertise in the field. For businesses that already exist, we've lent some resource. I don't know very specifically, because I'm not a small business owner downtown or locally, how effective the bits of grants and financial aid has been. But we need to make sure that businesses are able to open safely. We need to make sure that any policies that we can enforce, as far as parking spaces availability being turned into outdoor seating, which is hard in the winter. That was a great step in that right direction. But anything that makes it easier safely to operate a business is the best way that we can help them right now.
Great, thank you, Nic. Next question, if the new one-lane approach on Circle doesn't work, could we look back into going to what we had before? We'll start with Paul on this one. You have about 1 minute to answer.
Okay. Yeah, Circle is interesting. Other than the Van Buren Bridge, it generated much more email than any other topic since I've been on council, with passionate people on both sides and not much middle ground to try to find compromise. One of the things that I hope people recognize about Circle is that when it was completed, rather than lay in thermoplastic striping and markers, it was all done with, except crosswalks, was all done with paint. And the explicit purpose of that was that it could be undone if needed. You paint over it and you can go back to the old configuration pretty simply. Public Works will be monitoring a number of things over the next year. Unfortunately, with COVID, things like traffic counts are going to be tough to follow, but they're looking at traffic on Circle, wait times, numbers of accidents. They're looking at how many people are diverting to other streets. They're looking at response times from the fire department on Circle. And roughly a year from now, there will be a decision made to either keep the current the new configuration, or to revert to the old one. I was ambivalent about it at the time, actually driving the new one. It's not bad. Now, granted, we don't have the traffic we normally do, so it's impossible to assess how this thing will work as we return to normal in terms of traffic and schools and everything like that. That affects not only automobile traffic, but also bikes and pedestrians on Circle.
Great. Thank you, Paul. Nic, same question to you. If the new one-lane approach on Circle doesn't work, could we look back into going to what we had before?
I would be curious to know what would constitute as not working. I would imagine that'd be some measure of accidents and comparison to our statistics before. Everything comes with a grain of salt, and hopefully, casualty and destruction is not that green that we have to digest with this. I've driven it since it's over in this area, and I think that it's just fine. I think that the ability to lane select as a flow of traffic instead of having to make that much sooner and navigate back and forth just as you are crossing some of these intersections is difficult. I would support it, and I think that the city has done well in making it a temporary thing or permanently temporary, and that is a smart solution. So I would support it if the statistics suggested that we should revert.
Great, thank you, Nic. Next question, about 2 minutes to answer this. We'll start with Nic as well. What do you think is the biggest issue facing Corvallis, and how would you address it?
I think that it's been touched on by lots of us this evening. Is how do we recuperate from what has been lost over these last 7-8 months in the COVID pandemic? We have many challenges ahead of us. Some of them are very personal and localized challenges, and some of them are addressing our community. As we all sort of hunker down and trudge through this, I think a lot of our adjustments to our own personal lifestyles should be reflected in our community. I would consider myself to be a fairly liberal person. I've talked about potentially raising taxes and things like that, just as not as a blanket solution to everything, but just having these conversations on the table. But I think that, sorry, I lost my train of thought there. Our ability to come together in this more conservative, slightly weighing our needs versus wants is something that we need to really be looking at. I think the Van Buren Bridge was a great example of a need versus a want sort of issue that we are facing. It is an absolute want. It is of the highest want that many of our citizens could have, because it adds so many wonderfully intrinsic things to our life. But is it a need? Not necessarily. So I'm hoping that moving forward that we can continue to address these issues, balancing the needs versus the wants and the asks of the public as we spend their resources.
Great, thank you, Nic. Paul, same question to you. What do you think is the biggest issue facing Corvallis, and how would you address it? You have about 2 minutes to answer.
Okay, I think like several other people have said, including Mr. Bowman, I think understanding the medium impacts of COVID on the city and on its budget is probably the biggest short-term challenge we face. We know that there's several $1 million worth of budget hits coming from it, from things like lodging taxes, fines and forfeitures, including loss of parking income, revenue lost by Parks and Rec, and so on. There's unknown hits yet to come. Service bills being one of them, money from the state for things like highways being another one. And I think the biggest challenge for the city for the next 2 or 3 years is going to be to get in front of those budget numbers and balance programs and services against shrinking but uncertain. That's a huge challenge. We're actually in fairly good shape this fiscal year because much of our money came in last year in the form of property taxes, but we can't count on that in the future. Beyond that, looking longer term, I think housing and affordability of housing is probably our biggest long-term need. As has been noted, we have 20,000 people commuting into Corvallis every day. That creates problems for parking. It creates problems for managing our carbon. The city has added several thousand beds in the last few years with the student type apartments at the Retreat and the Domain and Washington Yards, whatever it's called now. That's made almost no dent in rental vacancies and seems not to be having any significant impact on rental rates. We have simply got to expand our housing inventory. House Bill 2001 will do some things on that, but probably not a whole lot for Corvallis. House Bill 2001, by the way, was the program that said you can't have strictly single-family zoning in low-density residential areas. You have to allow accessory development units, and you have to allow what we call middle housing, which is duplexes, quads, cottage clusters, whatever. That will have some impact on housing, but we simply need to find land and build both low and high-density housing at a rate we've not really seen in the recent past in Corvallis.
Great. Thank you, Paul. We have enough time to do a short closing statement. Maybe about a minute. We'll start with Paul, closing statement.
Okay. Yeah. As I said at the start, thank you to the Advocate, the City Club, and all of you for organizing this, and thank you for those who listened. Being a city councilor in Corvallis is a volunteer job, but it's a very important one. It's a job I take seriously, and I devote a lot of time to it because as councilors, we represent the city of Corvallis when we make decisions and when we do oversight of city staff and departments. We need to know, councilors, we need to reflect concerns and opinions of the residents in our ward because our decisions have a profound impact. As the incumbent in Ward 7, I've gotten to know a lot of people and processes in local government, and I understand the issues facing the city. We face important challenges, as have been mentioned, in things like housing, homelessness, climate change, law enforcement. I recognize that we have tight budgets, and it's going to be tough the next few years. We're going to have to do cutbacks. My goal is to represent all of you out there, the residents of Ward 7 and all of Corvallis, as we work to maintain Corvallis. I appreciate the trust that people put in me when they voted for me a year ago. I've tried to work very hard to live up to that trust, and I hope I've earned your vote for another full term on City Council. I do appreciate your support, but I think my parting words is, whoever you're supporting, please vote. It is really, really important this year, probably more than any time in my life. And thank you all again.
Great. Thank you, Paul. Nic, closing statement?
Also, thank you very much, CitySpeak. This event is exactly why I am participating and would be honored to represent Ward 7 as a city councilor. Being involved is important. Not everybody has the time and the energy and the resources to be involved full time. And as Mr. Schaffer has pointed out, being able to dedicate yourself to this job is important. I would like to represent Ward 7. I feel very confident in my skills to represent Ward 7. But if I was not elected as a councilor for this upcoming term, I'd be okay with that. I agree with Mr. Schaffer on many, many areas. In fact, last year, I voted for him. And I would vote for him. I would vote for him again this term if my name wasn't also on the ballot. He has represented this ward very well thus far, and I think that the year that he has spent getting himself accustomed to this position will serve him well should he be reelected. It is with the utmost gratitude that I've even had this chance to participate, and should the City of Corvallis and citizens of Ward 7 put me in this position of leadership, I would not let them down. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Nic. Thank you, Paul. Thanks to everyone who participated in this evening's CitySpeak debate. Thank you also to the Corvallis Advocate staff and for all the work they do behind the scenes to make these CitySpeaks possible. Also, thank you to our supporters, Peak Sports and First Alternative Natural Foods Co-op. This CitySpeak is adjourned. Good night.
Nic, I wish we had a chance to shake